Hi folks, and welcome back to Fishing with Den. Well, I'm having a pleasure day today, and I'm actually trying out down at Den's Pond, but I thought I'd take you through some basics of waggler fishing, because I haven't fished with a waggler for probably quite some time. And I know quite a few of you on the channel like to see me fishing with these things, but of course we've also got some newbies and some beginners, of course, who are brand new to fishing, probably onto the channel, and so I thought let's go through some waggler fishing basics today. We'll start off with the tackle. Now I'm using a 12-foot waggler rod. This is a Daiwa Yank and Bank, which I bought years ago. Cost about £90 back then. I think it's probably been discontinued now. But there's lots of other rods in a sort of similar range and cheaper, which you can get quite easily, and they're perfectly good rods. You don't have to spend the earth. The reel is my trusty old MAP Carptech 4000 FD. That's the one with the automatic bail arm, line release system there. Again, on this one I have done a particular review on this reel, so if you want to watch that, I'll put some links down in the description. In fact, thinking about it, there's going to be quite a lot of me talking about different things I've already done today, so I'll put links down in the description box just down below this main screen here, and you can click on them if you think they're going to be of use to you. But definitely have a look at the review of this reel. Now this is the 4000 size reel, and it's going with this 12-foot rod. Now the reason for that is that I fish some fairly large venues. I also fish some small ones. Obviously you have to tailor your tackle to what you're doing. Now I'm going to be carp fishing, not specimen carp fishing, but anything up to sort of 10-15 pounds is easily possible. So I've geared mine up to this 12-foot rod and a 4000 reel. If you're only fishing commercials and you're fishing snake lakes, for example, where they're only 16 meters wide, you could easily get by with a 10 or 11 foot rod and a 3000 size reel, because that's more suited to these smaller venues. But as I say, if you're going to fish a variety of venues, you need to be looking at bigger rods and bigger reels. And so if that isn't confusing enough for you, the answer of course to that is to go to the local tackle shop. They're a mine of information. Tell them where you're going to fish, what you're going to fish for, and they will actually tell you the best rods and reels for the job, whether it be a 12-foot and 4000 or a 10-foot and 3000 size reel. Now I can't give you specifics on all the different rods and things out there, but there's plenty, even in the lower cost range. Apparently there's some rods out there, 30 and 40 pounds at the moment. I think Drennan do one. I think their red range is quite good. I think Daiwa's just come out with some more as well. But as I say, just go into the tackle shop and ask. They're more than happy to help. So as I say, this is for carp. If you're only going to be fishing for small silverfish like roach and so on, you need a different setup again. But today we're specifically talking about a bit of carp fishing, which is pretty much prevalent in the UK at the moment. So we've talked about that. Main lines, I'm using a 6-pound breaking strain main line. Again, ask the tackle shop what they think is the best, and you'll get different answers from everybody, by the way. But again, be guided by the tackle shop, and I think 6-pound breaking strain line is perfectly adequate. And moving down a little bit, if I just release the bail arm. Right. I've actually attached the float using a link swivel, just one of these clip swivels that you see here. The float is a homemade one, it's a 3AA, I've put an insert in it, fairly thin insert, I'll come back to that shortly. And because the reason I've done it on the clip swivel is so I can change it if necessary. When I arrived here, there was no wind at all. Later on, it may well get up, so you may need to just change your float. Now there are other ways of doing this. Some floats don't have, excuse me, a ring on the bottom. And so what you do there is you have a little peg and you use a little silicone adapter, it's called, and you can put that onto the main line here. But for today I'll go with this. But again, you can see all this in the other videos that I've shown you at the bottom of the channel. I've started using these little rubber line stops as well above the float now. It used to be that we had shots above and below, but I find that putting one of these above the float keeps the shot in position, and it's perfectly good. That means I can then have any shot I need down the line. Now, because this is a loaded float, I don't need massive amounts. I'm not going to need the full 3AA because that's included in this lead piece here. So I've got, I think that's an AA and a couple of number 6s, and then if I can get myself off here. Today, because where I fish, we don't really catch fish on the drop. It's not like commercials. I'm actually just using 2 number 6s down the line just to sink it. Now, if you're going to be catching on the drop, which means it's falling through the water and you get a bite, then you might well go down to number 8s down here, or even number 9s or number 10s. But for me, I'm just going to be fishing on the bottom today because that's what these fish do. Remember, I live in Australia these days. They don't know what a commercial is over here, and the fish don't know what bait is. Hook length. This is, I think, 4 pounds breaking strain line, and we could go into diameters and all the rest of it. Oh, fish just jumped, made me jump. We could go into diameters and all the rest of it, but for example, Guru dragline, 6 pound dragline, is 0.25 millimeters. 0.22 millimeters in the matrix monofilament that I use is 8 pounds. Go figure. Anyway, that's a whole new minefield in itself. I use the drag line on here, so I've got 0.25 because there's lots of rocks and places where I fish. You probably wouldn't need to go that high, you know, 0.22, 0.20, something like that. But make sure you have a hook link on, a hook length. Okay. Now this one's probably about 30 centimeters long because I tie my own, and normally these are tied on with a loop-to-loop method down here. Again, loop-to-loop method, figure of 8 knots, all the rest of it I've done, and they'll be down in that box down below. I'm using a Kamasan B911 hook. This is a 14. Again, gauge it by the size of the fish you're going to catch and also the bait you're going to be using. So that's really it. Obviously you need to know how deep your swim is, so you have to plumb the depth. As before, link down below, show you how to do that. Now I've got pretty much exactly 3 feet today by the time you've taken the float into account. Haven't started yet. I have put a very small amount of pellets in there and probably half a dozen bits of corn, and I'm going to give it a go. As far as bait, I'm going to start off with a piece of sweet corn. Sweet corn's always a decent bait, but you can use pellets by all means. In the UK you've got major amounts of choice. You can use a hard pellet, and you can do that on a band, little rubber band on there, or you can just use a soft expander pellet and put it on the hook. Again, if you're not sure, have a look at the videos down below or ask in the tackle shop. As far as casting out goes, just make sure I'm sorted. Okay, so pick a marker on the far bank and aim for that. Now, you may have seen that stop because I've actually got on the line clip here, because today I'm going to be using that camcorder down there, hopefully to show you some bites. So that's why it stopped it. Now, you do need to sink the line, and again, link down below. So if I go rod underwater, 1, 2, 3, that's sunk all the line, and I can now put it on the rod rest. And that should now be in view of that camcorder down there. Now, I've used a thin insert today on the tip of the float. It's just a cane insert, which is 2 millimeters, because there's no real sort of tow on the water, and tow is simply when the wind blows, it sort of creates a current. So I can get away with that for now, and it makes the float more sensitive. Later on, if this wind does get up and create that undertow, I may well have to go to a thicker tip because it may be dragging under. I'm fishing probably 3 inches over depth, and all that means is that I've got about that much line lying on the bottom. There we are. And I've been fishing a few minutes, and we're in. You'll notice my clutch is clicking. You don't want to be trying to just yank them in, because you will find that just like that, you sometimes need to give them line. You can backwind, of course. There we are. Not a huge fish, but they've got huge amounts of power for such a small fish. And here we go. Whoop. This time. Okay. Again, if you haven't landed fish like this before, link in the downstairs below. I know this is going to get boring with that, folks, but there we are. Look, nice little fish. Well, I was reaching down for some bait then, and the reel was going backwards. So you need to be very careful that you don't lose your rod. I tend not to have the anti-reverse engaged because of exactly that reason. And my best ever viewed video, which got over 1 million views, would you believe, was where I had to go in after my rod. But that one just took off, didn't it? Not a huge fish either. Probably only a couple of pounds or so. But that's the power. So you can see already the Waggler's working well. You don't have to have all the fancy pole tackle that some of us use. And the hook's out. But look at that, lovely fish. Oh yes. Just take your time. They're not huge fish, but they're such good fun. And there was me concerned that there weren't going to be any fish left in here. Feels like it's full of them. And I haven't been down here for such a long time either. There we go. It's literally one a chuck from the off. And all I'm doing is feeding 3 or 4 bits of corn at a time, and 3 or 4 pellets around the float. Got to stick with it as well. Let's just hope this carries on, eh? Just goes to show you don't need to do anything complicated to catch a few carp. And that's what it's all about in the end. Go out, catch a few fish, enjoy yourself, and have a good day. And is it gonna go? Yay! Well, they're not huge fish, but isn't this fun? Bodes well for the future though, because these small fish, hopefully, if we don't get flooded out too often, will turn into big fish. Yep, hook keeps falling out in the net. Oh, and I always use barbless hooks, by the way. Something you should be aware of when you're waggler fishing is that you might find that your shots move slightly. Now these have only moved a very small amount, but as you can see they have moved. The good news is that these little rubber line stops are very solid and they stay in place very well. It's the shots that move, so just make sure they're on tighter. Now, don't recommend that you do that with your teeth because it's bad for them. I've just done it for the last 60 odd years and I'm just going to stay with it. So don't do as I say on this one. Sorry, rather don't do as I do, do as I say. Get it right in a minute. Right, what I wanted to show you here was if your shots do move, before you even started, what you should do is hook the line up on the line keeper just down here on the rod. All rods have them. And then just measure on your rod, take the float, and you want the tip of the float, and in this case the tip of the float is just past the first ring and probably about 100 millimeters, 10 centimeters from this ring. So if you aren't ever sure and the float has moved, you can just gauge it by just doing that. And you can put a little Tipex or something marker on there. I don't tend to bother. I'm fishing probably 3 inches over depth or 75 millimeters over depth, so half an inch here and there isn't going to make any difference whatsoever. As I say, this isn't top flight match fishing. This is just going out and enjoying yourself and still catching plenty of fish. Let's put another one on the net. This is too easy today. Little ones like this you can lift, but if you're not sure, always use the landing net. Probably only weighs 4 or 5 ounces, but he's tried to swallow the hook on this one. Not quite managed it, but a bit awkward to get to, so I'll use the disgorger on him. There we are. Nice little tiddler, isn't he? We need to think about feeding when we're doing this kind of thing, and there's any number of ways to do it. You can use balls of ground bait and put those in, whether they're sort of small little nuggets or large balls, that's up to you, but generally we find little and often is the best way to do it. So today all I'm doing is I'm feeding probably that many pellets and that many, which is only what, 3 or 4 bits of sweet corn at a time, and try and get it accurately around your float. It isn't the end of the world if you don't, but try and get it accurately. Whether you do it by hand, you might want to do it by catapult or even a throwing stick that I've used in the past, but just a few of those in, and you have to gauge it by the bites that are coming. So I can't tell you exactly how to do it, but if you put a pinch of each of those in to start with, and then give it a few minutes and another pinch, a few minutes and another pinch. When I say a few minutes, let's call it 5 minutes. It's not a hard and fast rule by any means. It's all guided by how many bites you're getting. If it goes in and goes under, you feed more and more often. If it goes in and it doesn't move, there's nothing there, so what's the point in feeding? So again, that's a whole nother thing, as the Americans would say. But the basic idea of feeding, little and often, works best when you're doing this kind of waggler fishing. The biggest mistakes I see when I see anglers waggler fishing is they don't sink the line. And you have to sink the line, because otherwise this surface skim pulls your float out of position. Again, video down below, but you'll notice I've got the tip of the rod just under the water, and in this case I reeled in. There is another way of doing it where you whip the rod up in the air, but again I'll show you that in the other video. So that's vital. If you don't do that, you're just not going to catch anything, because your float's just going to be moving across out of the way, and you see it all the time with new anglers. And hit it. Yay. Well, this one's only tiny. Wow. Lovely fish though, beautiful condition. Never been caught before because nobody ever fishes down here apart from Den. I'm starting to catch more regularly now, guys, so I've been putting feed in more regularly, same sort of amounts, but just every second fish, because I'm getting a bite after 20 or 30 seconds of it going in the water. Now that works great here because this is a natural venue and the fish don't really know what bait is. However, you've got a problem if you're fishing on a commercial, because as soon as you start doing this, get this fish in, as soon as you start feeding more regularly, the fish are probably going to come right up in the water to within the top few inches, and they'll be swirling around and causing you all sort of problems, and you're not going to catch. So that's always a difficult one. Under most circumstances, if we were match fishing, we'd just go to a shallow rig, little sort of small float, and fishing 6-8 inches, 12 inches deep, and then we'd be belting feeding all over the place. But if you're fishing a natural venue, this sort of feeding works great. Just had to change my hook because I felt the other one was just getting a little bit blunt, and sometimes I like to do that. It's always nice to have a really sharp hook on. But do you remember what I said earlier about checking the depth? Because I tie my own, the hook lengths may not always be the same length, because I don't always have a loop on them. Sometimes I make them this long and shorten them down. Remember what I said? Just check it against the rod. We're actually probably about an inch, 25 millimeters too short now. So what I'm going to do is just move that little rubber stop up, that much, move the shots up so they're underneath it. I'll check again, I'm pretty sure that's correct, but just to show you. And yeah, I'd say we're now at the exact mark. Again, as I said, you could have put a Tipp-Ex mark there if you wanted to, or a crayon, something like that. But half an inch when you're waggler fishing doesn't generally make that much difference if you're fishing a couple of 3 inches on the bottom like I am. Right, let's get back out there. I have to say I'm enjoying today. It's fish after fish. Oh, nearly struck then. See the bob? Remember, it could be line bites when you get bobs like that, so just be a little bit careful that you don't strike too soon. And if you're really new to this sort of thing, then a line bite is when the fish is actually moving around by your line and it catches it with its fin or its tail or something, and it just bobs the float like that. Bit of a bob, and yay! In again. They're not big fish today. The biggest I've had is probably about 3 pounds, but I don't care. It's just nice to be sitting out here. Remember, I'm retired, so I can come down on a weekday morning and just enjoy the place with nobody else around. Something I should mention, and it's something I do quite regularly. There's my hook just here, and I've got a number 6 shot about 3 inches or so, 7.5 centimeters up from there on the hook length. Now, if you're using really fine hook lengths, then don't do this, but when you're carp fishing and you're using thick hook lengths like I'm using today, I don't see it as a problem. The reason people don't like it is because on the very fine hook lengths it can damage it, especially if you move it up and down. But the purpose of doing this one is called the telltale method, or the telltale shot. And basically, I've shown this on a video, but all that happens is bait sits on the bottom, your shot is just off the bottom, so when a fish picks up the bait, it lifts up the shot too. The float lifts, as you saw from that last little bite there, and you can often strike at those. And I find, especially with finicky bites of things like crucians, possibly F1s and stuff like that, you may find that that helps you to get bites during the day. Of course, the best wife in the world's turned up and I get a bite. Really am bagging now, guys, so she's bought me a coffee. I'm going to have a bit of a break in a minute and have a chat. All right, let's get this one in. They really are coming thick and fast now. It's really turned into a bag up session. So, looks like it's going to be a really good day today. Although there is rain forecast for a bit later on. Probably about a pound, I suppose. This one's quite a thick fish. Ooh, he swallowed it again. Get this hook out. There we go. Look at that. Nice little fish, isn't it? Well, folks, that looks like it's going to be a really good day for me. I'm going to carry on for a short while. I've been catching very steadily throughout the last 3 hours that I've been fishing. Hopefully, this video has helped any new anglers to catch a few themselves. As I've said all along, we're not doing anything that's got any major amount of finesse. We're just doing what's necessary to catch fish, and plenty of them. Obviously, if you've been doing this for a long time, you probably already know all of this, but hopefully you just enjoyed watching me catch a few fish. Anyway, that's it for another one. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you did, click the like button. If you want to subscribe, feel free. And until the next time, bye for now.